extremely challenging and eventful. They have been playing a catch-up game in terms of ensuring that the digital estates and the digital business which have been built and grown leaps and bounds over the years, how to run them in a secured manner, and they are always on. While they have been playing this catch-up game of securing all these assets, I will share with you what has really happened over a period of time. The threat surface and the threat vectors have continuously grown leaps and bounds. And what it basically means for a lot of organizations is the customers, suppliers, and partners have become a very integral part of their digital fabric. For some, the number of applications have grown multifold. For yet more, these applications have gone to cloud, whether public or private. And for many more, and almost perhaps everyone, these applications are being accessed not only through the traditional endpoints, but also through the mobile apps. The perimeter which was built for so many years, for perhaps more than 20 years from the day of inception of cybersecurity, which was way back in late 80s, in 1980s, the perimeter is slowly lost its relevance. The so-called castle and moat model is no more relevant at all. The customers, the enterprise networks have typically gone on cloud, they've gone on mobile, the IT, OT infrastructures have got merged. And the new phrase is, and rightly so, that the cloud has become the new corporate data center and internet is fast becoming the new corporate network. While all this is happening, let's look at the life of the CIOs and CISOs and some of the other leaders in the cybersecurity fraternity. They have been grappling with the old aged infrastructure, which is highly fragmented and has multiple dashboards. So for them to really look at highly actionable, visible data, for them to really take remediation or any sort of response is becoming more and more challenging. With more number of digital assets, and I really do not want to go into the IoTs and the way the applications are growing and all of that, you all are well versed with that. But the reality is that the cyber logs, the cyber database, security database is growing at a tremendous pace. And so much so that every single organization we talk to, we keep hearing that the number of people in their incident response team is growing by 20%, 25% year on year. And this is not a very healthy sign. While we have this huge amount of logs and database, we need more people. But on the contrary, what is really happening is this is one domain where there is a huge deficit of cybersecurity human capital. On the other side, let's look at what adversaries are doing. I think the cyber criminals or the hackers or the perpetrators or whatever we want to call them, they are the most organized, well coordinated, well collaborated, and they've been able to create a dark web. But we, as good guys, have not been able to create a bright web so far. We don't collaborate the way we should be collaborating within the industry and across industry. And what has added fuel to the fire is that the legal and the regulatory framework has become extremely stringent and actually quite complex. We have the GDPRs, we have the Personal Data Protection Bill in India, we have other legal statutes, we have regulatory compliances within the industry verticals that we work in. So it has actually become very complex. And it is not incidental that World Economic Forum in the year 2018 and 2019 defined cyber attacks and data theft as two of the top 5 risks looming large on mankind in succession. So while this problem is on, and we are all grappling as cybersecurity fraternity to see to it that how we really handle this and address some of these challenges. Next slide, please. We have a huge new domain to tackle with. I'm sure none of us have seen as devastating as what we call it as the coronavirus pandemic. Can we have the next slide, please, Nagesh? So let me quickly get into, while we are all compulsively working from home and we've seen some new buzzwords We kind of started saying it as work from home enterprises. A lot of people are saying bring your own homes to the enterprises. So there is a new buzzword which has come. But let's look at the preparedness of the organizations. Now, almost all the enterprises, in terms of their cybersecurity infrastructure and controls, which is only as good as maybe a low single digit percentage of the employee base in any enterprise, which is typically the senior management, the senior executives, and people who travel all over the place. But today, the same infrastructure and controls need to be given to 100% of the employee base in any enterprise, which is a humongous task. But let's look at the preparedness and the agility of the cyber criminals and the bad guys. Just about in less than 1.5 months, they've been able to create more than 3,000 new domains. And I think, surprise to all of us, www.coronavirus.com has been registered by the cyber criminals. Look at the other side, the dark web, which is virtually become a den of all these cyber criminals and hackers for them to collaborate in a very organized manner. It is buzzing with COVID-19 kits. The fraudulent emails are all over the place. And what it basically means is you don't have to be an expert hacker to really find a hole in the enterprises or the governments all across the world. Even the novice hackers typically can do that. Let's look at, on the other side, our first line of defense. The first line of defense, which is people for us, is quite weak. The hackers, even pre-corona pandemic, could find their first prey in any phishing campaign in just about 82 seconds. And I can tell you this time is going to go down drastically, would have already gone down because of the fear and the inquisitiveness of the people to know more about corona and the way some of these phishing mails and spear phishing mails are being drafted and framed. Look at on the other side, we all are held back in our homes, jailed in our homes, locked down, but the number of UPI transactions even in the month of March were a whooping 1.2 billion. And what it means is there is a whole lot of responsibility on the application services providers who typically provide these apps, because these are also not that it is now, but earlier also they were up for grab, and the hackers were looking at breaching any which ways. But now I think it's become even more. And I did talk about in the first slide in terms of the human capital deficit. Here are the numbers. We are just about little more than 10% human skill capital in a country like India, which is supposed to be the global skill capital for IT worldwide. This is as per NASSCOM. We require 1 million people, but we're just about 100,000 people strong in terms of the cyber experts. Last but not the least, I think we all have done a good job to see to it that our organizations are up and running. We have put forth some tactical solutions which can get our businesses going. But I think it's time for us to ponder and think, are these the right solutions? Are these secure? Look at the way hackers look at something called as a path of least resistance. Zoom as a collaborative tool has been operating for so many years. But now that the world started using Zoom, there are a whole lot of vulnerabilities which have been found in Zoom, and it has been broken into. So look at the preparedness, look at the opportunity approach. Look at the
ERP going live.
You need to go on mute, please. So look at the preparedness of this community. So finally, before I hand it over to Dr. Pavan Duggal, I think it's time for us as good guys, as people from the industry, people from various organizations, to really think through in a very focused and a strategic manner whether work from home enterprises and go back to fundamentals, whether we are ready from people, process, technology, and legal framework and regulatory perspective. I think it's time for us to really think through and deploy some of the best systems. With this, I hand it over to Dr. Pavan Duggal. Frankly, requires no introduction. He's a cyber lawyer of global eminence and has been speaker in last so many years in the World Economic Forum, representing global cyber fraternity. Pavan, over to you.
Thanks, Harsh, for your kind words. It's good to connect with all of you. Well, after the massive landscape painting that's been done by Harsh, it's important to look at the practical problems from a legal and a policy standpoint that you as organizations need to be careful of in the coronavirus times. Next slide. Well, the first thing that's coming up is a massive increase in phishing emails, phishing SMSs, and phishing websites. They're all aiming to target the workers who are working from home. Because in this age of fear and panic, everybody wants an update of what's the latest happening. And more often than not, these employees working from home could be clicking on wrong websites and thereby finding themselves that they are becoming victims of these kinds of phishing exercises. Next slide. Clearly, when I look at the legal landscape in India, I begin with certain basic challenges. There are no specific rules and regulations in India pertaining to work from home. In fact, work from home concept has been evolving slowly but surely, but was never so significant so as to keep the attention span of the government and policymakers. So consequently, we don't have any legal framework on work from home. On top of it, we as a nation in India do not have a dedicated law on cybersecurity. We also do not have a dedicated law on data protection because the Personal Data Protection Bill of 2019 is still pending review before the Joint Parliamentary Committee. On top of it, we also do not have a dedicated law on privacy, whether it's data privacy or personal privacy. This is despite the Supreme Court declaring that all of us have got fundamental right to privacy under Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Next slide. So in this ecosystem, where do we as work from home stakeholders lie? And which law do I really need to follow? Well, there's no denying the fact that there's going to be one law, being the Indian cyber law, which will be governing all our activities in the work from home ecosystem, because this is the mother legislation that's dealing with all issues pertaining to use of 7 raw materials that we use on a daily basis, whether it's computers, computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, communication devices, as also data and information in the electronic form. So please ensure that your organizations are ensuring compliance with this law, more so that now you have been forced to go into the work from home paradigm given the national lockdown that's on till 15th currently, but is expected widely to continue for a couple of weeks thereafter as well. Next slide. So one thing we have to fundamentally start realizing is, where do we stand as companies? Here in the work from home ecosystem, we have to quickly realize that we as companies are no normal companies. In the eyes of Indian cyber law, you are an intermediary. You are a network service provider. When you provide that service to your employee that he can work from home, accessing your corporate network, you are providing a distinctive service and you completely fall within the ambit of Section 21W of the Information Technology Act. When you read that particular section, it's drafted in very, very broad, wide terms. It says intermediary with respect to any particular electronic record means any person who on behalf of another person receives, stores, or transmits that record or provides any service with respect to that record, and includes network service providers, internet service providers, web hosting companies, online auction portals, online payment sites, cyber cafes, search engines, and online marketplaces. So you may be none of these, but if you're a normal company who's allowing employees to work from home and while working from home connect to the corporate network, then clearly you become a network service provider and you are an intermediary. Once you're an intermediary, Section 79(2)(c) of the Information Technology Act says, sir, please exercise due diligence while you discharge your obligations under the law. And there are various parameters of due diligence that have been given under the Information Technology Act 2000 and also various rules and regulations made thereunder, including the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines Rules 2011 and the Information Technology Reasonable Security Practices and Procedures and Sensitive Personal Data or Information Rules 2011. Now, therefore, why do you need require to do due diligence? Well, we have been watching Ramayana and Mahabharata today on television, In Mahabharata, during the Gita discourse, Lord Krishna has a central one message. And the message says, come to my Sharan and I will protect you. The IT Act has a similar message under Section 79 of the IT Act. He says, come and comply with my provisions and I will guarantee you statutory exemption from liability. That means you will never be forced to pay 1 rupee damages by way of compensation. You can never be sent to jail. Now that's the statutory promise that the law is extending to you, provided you as an intermediary are complying with the rules and regulations of the IT Act and the various elements pertaining to the due diligence that needs to be done in this context. Next slide. What happens if you don't comply? Nothing much. As companies, just be prepared for 2 consequences. Number 1, you can be sued for damages by way of compensation. One is up to 5 crore rupees per contravention for normal data. And if it's breach of sensitive personal data, then it's unlimited damages by way of compensation. These are by virtue of Section 43 and 43A of the Information Technology Act. The second exposure, nothing much, just a jail term of imprisonment beginning from 3 years imprisonment to life imprisonment, fine ranging from 1 lakh rupees to 10 lakh rupees. That's the 2 broad spectrums of exposure that the law has for you as companies. In case if there's some mess up taking place thanks to work from home, any of your employee decides to act smart or tries to misuse corporate data or abuse the confidential data, or more significantly goes ahead and transmits or shares unauthorizedly the client data that you are working with as a corporate. So these consequences are pretty much harsh, but they are already in place. Now, independent that whether as a company you had the time to go on to the work from home paradigm in completeness, or you are in transition, or you have been caught unprepared, the moment today when you're allowing your employees to work from home, please be prepared for these legal consequences that the law is providing for you. Next slide. So the good news is that the legal jurisprudence pertaining to working from home is continuing to evolve. Look at various governmental notifications. They're encouraging companies to encourage their employees to work from home wherever feasible. They are deliberately putting that caveat wherever feasible. They're not asking you to go whole hog into work from home, but also there are some notifications, for example, of Delhi government, which wants you to pay money to all your employees as full salary till such time it was 31st and maybe even later as well. So I think in these ecosystems, due diligence and care will have to be the guiding mantra for you as a company when you are engaging in work from home. Please ensure that if you have not yet done so, please right now do your compliances under the IT Act and rules and regulations. We can always say, look, we were thrust with the work from home thanks to the lockdown. But the moment I got sensitized about it, I started doing my compliances. And these compliances do not have to be verbal. They have to be in writing and documented. So please have those requisite terms and conditions, rules and regulations, privacy policies, and various policies to comply with the IT Act, so that you can escape exposure to potential legal consequences. Next slide. Well, whether we like it or not, it's a new world that's happening while we are at home. The new cyber world order is getting developed. By the time coronavirus age comes to an end and we are able to fight the pandemic, once we enter into the cyber age, it'll be a new age altogether. There are so many distinctive developments that are taking place at government's level, which are going to completely change the landscape for us on cybersecurity, for us as users of the digital ecosystem. Let's take the case of Hungary. The Hungarian Prime Minister has actually seized power upon himself and has given upon him a license that he's going to rule indefinitely because they want to fight the coronavirus pandemic. And it's not just this pandemic. Once this pandemic comes to a close, increasing governmental state power is going to be the predominant element that we see all across. And governments will be very, very reluctant to actually leave behind these respective powers that they have actually gained during the coronavirus times. So cybersecurity parameters while working from home must be specifically addressed. And that's why the technical parameters of what's going to be discussed in this webinar assume far more relevance and significance. Next slide. Okay, What happens if your employee says, Chief, I'm going to copy your data. I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to share it, sell it to competition. Well, it's going to happen because in India, the ability of us to have cybersecurity as a way of life is virtually non-existent. Yes, in corporate culture, I still am under some peer pressure to adhere to corporate norms. But in the comfort of my home, when nobody is watching me, what am I going to be doing? And even if you put me on through the VPN, what is your guarantee as a company that the employee is not doing something mischievous, malicious, or which could potentially land you into trouble? And therefore, it's very important that as a beginning starting point, as a company, you must have a dedicated work from home policy. I find a majority of companies have started allowing work from home without having a dedicated work from home policy. You need to not only have that policy which stipulates the rights, duties, and obligations of employers and employees, but more significantly, you also have to take consent of the employee. Now, you can't say I was thrust into the lockdown and I was forced to go into work from home. Yes, you were. But then what stopped you from having, even now, during the lockdown, entire dedicated work from home policy? So if your company has still not got it, please do that. We are right now, as we are talking, developing various work from home policies for different clients because they never anticipated they're going to be in this kind of a deep trouble and they want to take some care, some caution. So this is the kind of a Suraksha Kavach that I expect you as an organization must have, because in the event, if you have those policy, and if after that the employee, after consenting or agreeing to the same, does some mischief, then the pure legal responsibility and burden of the same, and also the exposure, will be that of the particular individual and no one else. So you will have to quickly start working in this regard if you have not already such a policy in place. Next slide. Okay. Do you have a duty to report cybersecurity breaches in today's coronavirus times? The answer is a clear yes, because this is thanks to the notification of 4th of January 2017, which is mandating every company to report a cybersecurity breach the moment they come to know about it. You don't report, that actually is an offense, punishable with 1 year's imprisonment and fine. So since you would be providing various of these services or amenities to your employees working from home, there's another ramification. As a company, the law requires you to obtain an other service providers or an OSP registration with the Department of Telecommunications. You as a company were never set up for the purposes of allowing your employees to work from home. And now they're working from home, you categorically come within the definition of an OSP, another service provider. And therefore, having in place the requisite application for OSP filed with the DOT could be a good starting point to protect ourselves. Do not worry. When are you going to get the registration? No problem. Continue with your operations. But please file that electronically so that at least tomorrow there's some problem, I can actually go and get behind the cover that's been given to me by the law in this regard. Next slide. So what are the major compliances that you're required to do? I just listed some of these just for your perusal. So please comply with the Information Technology Act 2000, various rules and regulations under the IT Act, the notifications of the Computer Emergency Response Team, and specifically the notification of 4th January 2017. There are other guidelines which have been issued by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Please go through them. To the extent they are applicable to your operations, please ensure compliance. There are other guidelines being issued by the government for the purposes of fighting COVID. Please go through the same and see, to the extent possible in your sector or vertical, you are seen to be compliant with the same. Further, there are compliance with the SEBI and RBI in case you are falling within their particular ambit. Good news is that there are certain kind of relaxations that have been provided, but the relaxations do not mean that you do not comply. Compliance has to be documented, has to be written. You're actually walking into an uncertain, unknown, dark zone. You do not know from which side you're going to be hit. So these are kind of a good kind of, shall I say, security protective covers that I would want you to comply with and wear when you are going in this uncharted terrain of work from home. Next paragraph. Next slide. Okay, so it's a fascinating time. The jurisprudence concerning work from home is constantly evolving. My latest book on coronavirus, work from home and legalities is already up. You could have a look at that. In addition, on Udemy, I have created an online course on coronavirus, work from home and legal issues. A short course for about an hour or so. In case if you have time, please go through the same, where I discuss various other ramifications from an international perspective. What any organization needs to be keeping in mind when it's going about doing the various activities pertaining to work from home. Clearly, times are telling us that cybercrime is constantly increasing. Well, last year, the survey was that the world would have lost more than $2 trillion in 2019 to cybersecurity breaches and more than $6 trillion by 2021. I believe these figures will have to be drastically revised. The actual figures are going to be far, far worse. And in this dark, deep times that we are walking in, we've actually no clue of what, how, and how to respond when something hits us. So if I'm able to be seen to be compliant with my local laws, if I look at what my international best practices are pertaining to work from home, if I can do my requisite due diligence and I can put in place the requisite cybersecurity services and products in place so that I can be reasonably more safe and secure. I mean, that's all the law is requiring you to do. The law is not wanting you to stop working, to stop work from home, first do compliances and then start. No, that's not the option of the law. The law says, please continue. The governments of the country are saying, please go ahead and do work from home. We are here to support you. But please remember, once there's a trouble, it's going to be you and your organization alone that will be facing the trouble. You will be facing the heat, no one else. So it's better to be erring on the side of caution. Keep in mind these nuances, and very happy to further share other perspectives during the question and answer session. All I can say is this is a very uncharted territory. The law is unprepared, and I see a huge series and huge increase of litigations the moment coronavirus pandemic is coming towards a close and after it closes down. And as an organization, you have to plan and prepare for these increased, enhanced exposure to legal consequences. Next slide. I think that brings me to the end of this presentation. All I can say is the law is evolving. The government is thinking on its feet, but the government is telling us, look, while we are fighting the pandemic, do not forget your basic principles, your basic cyber hygienes. Do that properly, and hopefully we'll all be able to sail through this coronavirus times together. Thanks, and over to you, Harsh and Nagesh.
Hey, thanks, Pavan. Absolutely exemplary talk. I think it really gives a lot of insight. All that I can say is, whether the world is prepared or no, Pavan Duggal is prepared. He's virtually running at a Ferrari pace as fast as the hacking community. He already has got a book on cyber security and coronavirus and stuff like that. So, which is work from home enterprises. So thanks, Pavan, for that. And over to you, Bruno.
Yeah, thank you, Harsh. And Pavan, yes, I concur with Harsh. I must say it was extremely valuable information. I think all of us are grappling with, the legal implications. And so what you've shared in terms of considerations, guidelines, registrations that should be in place and the compliances that we need to review, extremely valuable. Thank you so much for that. And so, this next section, which I'm going to talk about for the next 20 minutes, is focused on, the technological aspects that companies should consider as you're dealing with this new reality. So next slide, Nagesh. So, I want to start with, the lockdown was looming. A lot of organizations, had to quickly scramble to put a solution in place. And the traditional method that most of them have used is what, as Pavan and Harsh was a VPN, right? And if you see the model of how a VPN architecture works, you have a employee at home making a network connection over the internet and connecting to your data center. So there is a layer 3 connection happening, and there's a port open at the data center waiting for the connection. Now lockdown's done, everyone's doing this, and now with everyone settling in for the long haul, people are taking a pause and saying, wait a minute, is this really the model that I actually want? Because this was designed in an era when employees used to work, connect remotely for a very small fraction of time during the day, maybe half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the evening, maximum 2 hours, and only a small percentage of the workforce. Now, all of a sudden, your entire workforce is connecting to your network from outside in the bad internet that Harsh and Pavan talked about. And so companies are saying, is this really the right thing to be exposing my data center? Do I really, should I really be giving my employee from outside access to my network so that I can get access to the applications? And the good news and the answer is no, you don't have to do that. So next slide, please. So what's dawning on organizations is, and as Ash talked about, right, in this new reality of employees being outside the office, we need to do away with the old model, which is perimeter based. So in this new architecture, the first thing that stands out is you completely isolate your data center. There should be nothing exposed to the internet. So one good outcome of that is it vastly reduces an organization's attack surface. And on the user side, instead of connecting and applying the security checks at the perimeter, which in the prior model was all the way at the data center, you have what is typically called a proxy platform in between the user and the data center, and you do all the necessary checks at that level about the user, right? Is this a legitimate user or not? And then you allow him access. And the final thing is you allow him access on a much faster and more secure connection, which is typically done at the application level, not network layer. So this is, in a nutshell, what a lot of organizations are now looking to move towards. Next slide, please. And then everyone wonders, right? Hey, Akamai, how is it that you can confidently say that over this hostile internet and unreliable network of networks, can you guarantee a secure connection over layer 7? And the reason for that is, as most of you all know, we are a leader in what is traditionally known as the content delivery network, right? We have a lot of servers in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 ISPs all over India, as you can see from the map. So what this gives us is the ability to become like the FedEx of the internet. If you take the analogy of Google Maps, it gives you optimal routes. That is what Akamai is able to do because we're so widely distributed. Next slide, please. So because of that model, what we are giving organizations is a new reference architecture to consider in this new reality. And as you can see in this one, on the left-hand side is their data centers and their offices. They can exist, but they're completely shut down from the internet. And the internet is the gray box there. The Akamai platform is an overlay. And what we're now doing is, instead of having security controls at your perimeter, you push it all the way onto the Akamai platform. Now, no matter where the user is or the attacker, you apply those security policies then and there and give them access only to an application, never to the network. So in this model, you don't have to worry about firewall rules, no whitelisting, no blacklisting. You don't worry about the network. And this is what every one of us is used to when it comes to the internet, right? Think of us, there's 100 plus participants in this webinar. All of y'all are connecting from your home networks. Not a single one, I bet you, has a firewall or an ITS or VPN there. We do not worry about network-based security controls on the internet. What Akamai is doing with this reference architecture is giving organizations the ability to use the same principles which are used very well for business to consumer sites like banking sites, insurance sites, and apply that for your internal applications, your emails, your intranet. And it brings along a lot of benefits, right? In this new era where even the IT admins are remote, you have applications in cloud environments like AWS, Azure. You're not going to go there physically, and you don't want to be doing, all the rules at that network level. This gives you the ability to manage it centrally, regardless of where your applications are, where your users are. Next slide, please. So the common question that comes up is, okay, you've done away with networks. How on earth will I identify my user, right? Now think about it. This problem's already been solved. How do you access your personal banking application or your insurance site? You provide your identity. You provide a second multi-factor, right? So these are signals that a platform like Akamai has access to. I know everything about you, your identity, the multi-factor. We can even collect signals about your device. What is the state of the device? Is there any threat coming from there? So these plethora of signals give an organization enough access controls to be able to step up or step up the level of authentication based on the risk profile of an application, right? If it's a low risk application, let's say a timesheet, maybe all you need is username, password, and multi-factor. But if it's your finance app, as Pavan said, we can't, and employees may have good intention, but there could be a malware on that machine. You want to step up saying, hey, I want to know absolutely certain that device is safe. And these are the types of signals that are used to ensure that the person is indeed who he says he is, and whatever device he's using to access my sacred internal application meets the criteria that I deem acceptable for my risk profile. So this is why we call this platform adaptive access control, because you can step up and step down per application. Next slide, please. Now, from a customer perspective, this is what the question that everyone always asks is, hey, the key value is, especially in current time, you want it to be simple and lightweight to deploy. Just imagine putting another hardware box in your data center, ensuring it works well with the others, all of the configuration. You don't have that luxury now, nor do people want that. They just want a simple, lightweight solution that you can deploy, coexist with your existing model. And as with all new cloud-based solutions, right, they're all subscription-based. And most importantly, it should scale reliably for unlimited users, apps, because you want to grow. You're going to increase your user count. You're going to probably make acquisitions. And this platform ensures that it's ready for your future scale and growth. Next slide, please. Now, the other nice thing with this type of a model, which you do cloud-based proxy, is it's very easy to deploy. Unlike traditional architectures, which probably takes weeks to months. In this case, you can actually try it out for one specific application, and it can seamlessly coexist with everything else. Remember, it's not a hardware box. It's a separate proxy that's just in the path between your data center and your users. So customers really like the fact that it's very, very easy to get on board onto this model. It's not a forklift upgrade. You can do it gradually, and maybe you evolve it over time, right? 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, it doesn't matter. You have a very nice upgrade path. Next slide, please. So the common summary for this is just to make sure people get the difference, right? I always get this question. So how are you different from VPNs? Now, the reality is this model is not a VPN, right? It completely eliminates VPN. If you see your traditional architecture, as I said, it's network-based. You need a port open. You allow it only from corporate devices because you need to ensure that there's a client that you can install to connect it. Your security is applied at the DC. You do not have any control over the path from your home all the way to the data center. The proxy model is completely different. The reason we call it zero trust is similar to the internet. When you access your personal bank or your insurance site, nobody cares whether your device is infected or has malware. It's completely untrusted. You verify your identity and you get access to the application only, the banking application only. You don't connect to the network. So in this model, we're doing zero trust for your internal application in your organization. App access only, no network, ports are all closed, so your attack surface is reduced. Now you can consider giving accesses even to BYOD devices, because you're doing a security check closer to them and you have a whole bunch of signals. And the best part is you can control user experience. You don't have to worry about productivity concerns, and it scales on demand because it's cloud-based. Next slide, please. So here is a case study of a company that recently that had thousands of employees, right, wanting access to their internal applications from both corporate and personal devices, and large organizations, so they wanted to scale for unlimited apps and users. Now, the primary reason they liked the Akamai solution was it's very simple and easy to set up. And they adopted it, group by group by group. And the moment the word spread, they rapidly added on more and more users, more and more applications. And All of that worked flawlessly without any compromised user experience, and it met their security guidelines. Next slide, please. And this is just an illustration of, just look at the spread of the users all over. Absolutely flawless access, no matter where your employee is accessing from. Tier 2 city, Tier 3 city, 3G, 4G, doesn't matter, right? The platform ensures you have a secure and good user experience. Next slide, please. So the other common question I get is, everyone's grappling this work from home is, what, it'll be temporary. What happens after that? The good news is this architecture of moving away from the perimeter, which Harsh talked about, has always been in existence, and we've been advocating it for the past 3 years. The only difference was there was no compelling reason. Now with this coronavirus situation, people were forced to adopt something because they had to give access to their entire workforce. But don't despair, right? It's not a one-time fix. That's just a stepping stone to move your entire organization away from a perimeter architecture to a zero trust model, and eventually move a lot more security services onto the edge where it makes sense, and keep what matters in the data center. So remember, this is just a start of the journey for you to adopt it. The work from home was just a catalyst to have a lot more organizations adopt this model. Next slide, please. And and Akamai, we have to eat our own dog food, right? We've already been on this journey. Frankly, we've been doing this for a lot of time. So even before the coronavirus hit, for me, for Akamai and as an employee personally, there was absolutely no impact, because pre-coronavirus time, we were already on that model. So whether I was in the office or at home, didn't matter. I was using the internet, I was using all the signals. And so once this hit, from Akamai IT administrator standpoint, they didn't have to do anything, because they had already adopted this model and a few other organizations, which is what you can also do moving forward. Next slide, please. Now, everyone's currently at a particular situation, and given the resources at your disposal, you did what you had to, and that was the right thing. Now you're here assessing, hey, what do I do in this new reality for the next 12 months, 1 year, 2 years? So if your organization, one of those, many of you all have, now this is the start of the year, and you're probably assessing, okay, do I need to optimize my BCP plan and my network for, future requirements? If you're in that mode, iValue and Akamai and Pavan are here to help. Reach out to us. We can review your priorities and strategy, do an assessment, and provide you appropriate recommendations, so you're covered both from a technological, legal, and services standpoint. So with that, I'm done with my part of it. Harsh and Nagesh, I will hand it over to you guys.
Great. Thanks, Bruno. Thanks, Dr. Duggal sir and Harsh sir, for the beautiful way in which you have explained about the compliance, about the need of the hour. So now the podium is open for questions from all the delegates who are there part of this.
So Nagesh, I'm presuming you will be looking at the questions, right? Because I can't see where it's going to be coming up.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, this is Ramakrishna from TCS. So a question for Pavan Duggal, sir. So just wanted to, more brief on, just you have to comply on other service provider license. Can you, with DOT, can you please brief me about this?
Pavan, you are on mute. Pavan, you are on mute. Okay, we will unmute you. Nagesh, if you can unmute Pavan, please.
Oh, thank you. So, Mr. Ramakrishnan, thanks for your question. Well, typically the perception is that because you are in the telecommunications sector, you would want to run a call center, therefore you would require an other service provider's license. But these are unprecedented times. What's currently happening is nothing short of act of God or force majeure. So now you've been forced to ask employees to work from home. Now, when you're doing so, you're providing that network and the service. So when I look at the legal definition of who all gets covered under the other service providers category, any company that's allowing its employee to work from home is falling in that category. And therefore, as a matter of proactive compliance, it's better that we should file that. At Pavan Duggal Associates, my law firm, we have been doing it for various of our clients. We are doing it online. We tell the clients, look, this is a kind of a proactive, preventive measure that we want you to do, because I do not know on which side of the road the camel is going to sit after the pandemic comes to the close. I also do not know which of my competition is going to target me. Now, when I look at the cybersecurity breaches that are happening globally, which are constantly increasing, Indians are not going to be exempted from the same. Well, we've seen massive underreporting of these cybersecurity breaches happening while working from home. But now these cyber criminals are increasingly focusing on the vulnerable, patchy portion of the work from home premise through which they can actually get into the network. So if I can tomorrow say that, look, I have complied with your OSP registration, I have complied with your compliances as an intermediary, I am going to be protected under the law. You see, my main purpose is not to try to be an astrologer or soothsayer to demonstrate or predict what's going to happen. I just cannot predict what's going to happen. But yes, these are churning the great Manthan, Samudra Manthan days of our times. So competition is also looking at killing you or potentially impacting you. So trying to, maybe it's competition, whether it's state or non-state actors who are trying to breach your cybersecurity and the work from home paradigm, the idea will be to somehow put you into an uncomplimentary light. If that's going to be happening, it's better to be on the side of caution. Typically, for normal days, you would not have required an OSP, but this is a kind of an abundant precaution. I want to tell the court of law tomorrow when the problem arises, sir, I did all that was possible for me as an organization to do. Yes, I got covered under OSP definition after I allowed the work from home during coronavirus times. I applied for the registration. Please understand, for DOT, this may be low priority, but getting that requisite proof that you applied is a good kind of an insurance that I would want you to buy. Further, getting your documents in place and getting a consent of your employees is very essential. Now, a lot of times, a lot of these companies like yours are ISO 27001 compliant. There are various restrictions on what kind of things can or cannot be allowed. Now, work from home is going to be a kind of a temporary exemption to certain of these existing security practices. Now, for the purposes of ensuring that you're able to do things correctly, these are good raincoats that I'm asking you as an organization to wear, because I know you're going out in the open. It's going to be raining. It may be storm. It may be anything. These thunder coats are going to, at least, or these raincoats will help protect you from getting wet. Because again, these are uncharted territory. I don't want tomorrow, you as an organization don't do anything. You want to rely upon the Indian Jugaad School of Management and you think you will manage everything. Maybe it may not happen. Maybe you are lucky. But in case if that doesn't happen, at least I want to fall back. And mind you, the remarkable exemption that the IT law provides to all organizations becomes even more relevant and topical in coronavirus times. If the law is guaranteeing you, sir, do follow whatever mandate I'm telling you, and I'm guaranteeing to you that you will not be held liable for making any payment or criminal liability. What else would a company want in these times? This is a kind of a reasonable, can I say, certainty radar that's being offered to my ship in these choppy waters. Therefore, it's better to comply. Yes, you can always say, look, I'm not an OSP. I don't want to comply. Surely, that's your discretion. But it's better to err on the side of caution rather than to do this, because when you are now doing your OSP operations during the coronavirus times, please go and look at the definition of an OSP and ask for yourself whether your organization is complying with the same. If so, then I think it's best to be on the right side. Though what I'm talking to you is something that even the DOT is not talking. They haven't yet woken up to these requirements. But government being government, you just can't predict them. Tomorrow, suddenly they wake up and say, look, chief, you were coming in this category. You didn't comply. So how about coming over? Or how about starting a new investigation with you? I don't know which particular focal area of these trends are going to happen. So I presume I leave it to your discretion, but it'll be on the side of valor and caution that we go in this direction of compliances, including OSP registrations. Thanks, and over to you, Nagesh.
Thanks for answering that question, sir. Any more questions from the audience side?
Hey, folks, all that I can tell you is that Pavan is a very difficult resource to get on a call for 1.5 hours. So any questions, please ask.
Well, while we are waiting for another question, I just want to share up my perspective to say that in these coronavirus times, there are going to be increasing cyber criminal activities on your corporate networks. Yes, by and large, companies have been not reporting, underreporting. That's okay. But in these times, whether if you think the cyber criminal activities of such a nature that it requires reporting, I'll urge you to be on the side of caution and report this. Primarily because the CERT has not woken up to this. When I look at the website of the Computer Emergency Response Team, I find these just a couple of notifications sensitizing about some computer threats. But surely, prior to the coronavirus times, they were ventilating the thought process that they will look at instances that are getting reported in the public domain, which have not been reported by companies, and then they could potentially be looking in the direction of enforcing action. So again, it's better to be on the side of caution. And in case if you are asking your employees to work from home, whether you have a work from home policy or whether you have some consent, get any kind of a consent from your guys. Because typically when an employee is working in your corporate network, he's in an insulated bubble, a capsule. And therefore his compliance with all your terms are bound to be presumed. But when he's working from home, he's no longer in your corporate capsule. Much that you may put him through a VPN, the fact still remains is that when he's accessing your network from home, it's a different ball game altogether. So getting his fresh consents to your existing terms, to the extent they are applicable to work from home, would also be a good idea in this regard. Well, I expect for companies like you who are in critical information infrastructure business, you are potentially under target. The Bruno University Hospital in the Czech Republic has been attacked by a massive cybersecurity breach. And this is the Czech Republic's biggest COVID-19 testing laboratories. And they got hacked by such an attack that they had to close down all networks and suspend all medical treatments. Similarly, if the US Department of Health and Human Services can be attacked by a massive distributed denial of service attack that could potentially put their networks down for a short period of time, I think we as Indian companies have to realize that we are increasingly going to be on the radar for these cyber criminals and cyber security breaches. Therefore, getting your appropriate umbrellas out in these times could be a good idea. And therefore, what Bruno talked about, having that approach for a holistic perspective on security in these coronavirus times could be really helpful to you. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Bruno. This question is to you. I'm sure in these times of distress and people having this confusion, I'm sure a lot of people would have a lot of confusions. Now with this session, a lot of these are cleared thanks to Dr. Duggal and the way that you have put forward the Akamai solution. If you could, tell us about the kind of queries that you have been having in terms of from the customers who want to deploy these solutions, and how is it that you take this forward?
Thank you, Nagesh. I think the kind of queries primarily fall under two buckets. One is scale, because a lot of them had provisioned their remote access solution for a small percentage of the workforce, and now they needed to scale reliably for the entire workforce, right? So how can you do that without hardware upgrade, installation, administration? So that was one use case. And the second one is mostly from the security standpoint, right? Like Pavan talked about, a lot of organizations are concerned because attackers go with the flavor of the season, right? And now it's coronavirus. They know everyone's working from home and they know they're going to be targets. So customers are looking at a model where they can provide access to these employees to internal applications without exposing the company network to the internet. Now, interestingly, even in that use case, especially for the Indian context, there are two different types of use cases, right? One is the common one, which is as an organized employee, I have to access my corporate applications. However, keep in mind, a lot of people in the workforce here are in the IT, business services, knowledge services sector, and they're supporting clients overseas, and they need to have access to end customer environments, right? So both of these models, access to your own applications and access to your applications in your end customer environments without having to worry about network connection and exposing your data center to the internet, are broadly the considerations and use cases they approach us for.
Yeah, thanks, Bruno. There's one more question that that comes to mind. In today's context, with all these laws of privacy and all which are coming, when we talk about solutions for the financial sector, and we look at the kind of scale that the platform that you mentioned has, how safe can we say that the data is there on the platform? How restricted it is?
Yeah, so see that does come up a lot, and I think Pavan did allude to this, right? See, frankly, there's no silver bullet to tackle, right? There's no tackle all these potential security threats intended by the employee or by an attacker, that's adversary that's penetrated into an employee's machine. So all we can do is ensure that whatever solution that, let's say, an FSI organization is considering complies with their expected security guidelines. And typically, most of the organizations, ask us for, hey, provide me a security posture document of the platform. Does it comply with the different regulations, right? GDPR, the InfoSec process. They, serious organizations understand that it's an attack. They just want to know what's your process for informing if there's a breach. Like because they're using a platform like us, we are now part of their solution. They're answerable to ensure I can, so frankly,
folks will request you to go on mute, please.
He's saying I'll go and pick it up.
Yeah, Nagesh. Yeah, thank you, Nagesh. I think so. Frankly, Nagesh, that question does bring up a lot of not just FSI, right? People look at, hey, when you look at this type of model and a platform, is that someone you can trust to be there with you and provide you the necessary information so that you can, when you're up against the government or a regulator or your own internal audit and risk and compliance teams, you have the necessary information to prove that this solution is complies and is part and parcel of what it is. But it's not the only one, right? You still need all the others to ensure. It's like a defense in that model. So all we endeavor to do is ensure ours fits into their expected security requirements.
Thanks, Bruno. That really clarified the entire scenario. Thank you so much.
Bruno, there is one question by one Mr. Syed who asks, how does an internal user access the app with ZTA? Does he go all the way to internet and come back to his own network through Akamai cloud to access the corporate app?
Correct. So, Syed, yes, see, it's no different from, think of your own personal bank, right? I don't know which one you use, right? ICICI Access. In that scenario, ICICI or Access doesn't care whether you're in the office or at home. So it's location agnostic. They don't worry where Syed is. All they care about is when Syed is accessing that application. Yes, one requirement is you need to have internet access. If you don't have internet access, you're not getting access to your personal bank. Similarly, you're not getting access to your corporate application. But what happens is when you make that initial request, the focus is going to be on validating you as a person, your identity. And all of the security checks that have been prescribed by your IT team or the application owner, saying, Akamai, ensure you validate all of these necessary risk profiles and parameters. Only if Syed passes them, you grant him access to that application only. So the answer is yes, you need internet. It always goes through that like your personal banking. And the decision or the criteria that is set for you to access an application is the decision of the application owner. So that's how this works. Similar to your personal bank, right? Similar to that. I hope that answered the question. Sorry.
Bruno, there is thanks for the answer. There is one more question by one Mr. Sridhar Sampath Kumar, which says, I have a question regarding making AD accessible for pushing GPO to client over internet without having VPN.
AD accessible. Oh, so group policies, you mean? Group policy. Yeah, okay.
That's right.
Yeah, I got it. Yes,
That's right.
Yes. So, hi, Sridhar, bottom line is, it is possible in the sense that today you have your identity store, which is AD, you have your group policies, you have everything there. Remember in one of the slides I said, right, your existing ecosystem remains untouched. You continue to enforce whatever policies you have. The only difference, the reason why Akamai doesn't impact all of those and continues to use identity and policies is, remember what I'm replacing. I'm no longer using a VPN. Instead of a VPN, it's a layer 7 TLS connection over the internet. So I'm only the transport in between your user and your data center. So everything, the application part, the authorization, the policies in your network, all of your other security checks do not change. That is why it is easy to deploy. I'm only replacing the VPN with the Akamai path on the internet.
Bruno, there is one more question.
Just a connected question to it, Bruno. I want to know, when you said you don't need VPN, fine. What changes do we need to do on the system that's in the internet?
Yeah, so frankly, Sridhar, as with any solution, right, there are certain minimal changes that need to be done. On the data center side, you need to deploy a piece of software, which, because I need to be in the data center, it's a virtual appliance, because you need access to your private IP space, right? And that does an outbound dialer to connect to the platform. So one set of configuration in your environment needs to be deploying of that virtual appliance and ensuring it has connection to the internet. So that's one thing that has to be done in your network. Everything else is like any SaaS platform, right? If you sign up any other cloud provider, what happens? Your IT administrator goes to the portal and does all the necessary configurations there. So there are steps to set up an application so that it can be accessed by users, all of the identities. There's a wizard for that. So that's done, however, on the Akamai administrative portal. So
Thank you.
Offline, yeah. So it is fairly straightforward. There's definitely steps, and we can talk offline on the specifics given your use case. But
exactly, you can connect with me offline. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Bruno, one question from Mr. Nrishin Kumar. Can Akamai help monitor and block if any zero-day attack happening from the source computer if infected?
Yeah. So now, people can call it 0 day or what, Nagesh and Mr. Sampath Kumar, right? Sampath Kumar, right? Did I get it right? So
no, that was Nrishin Kumar.
So,
anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nrsimha Kumar.
Yeah, Nrsimha Kumar. Hi, sorry about that. So the answer is yes. One of the goals of the platform is to determine if there has been threats from that machine, and if there are, block it and you do not allow access. And people always ask, hey, how reliable are you as compared to all of the others, right? Remember I said security is a defense in depth, there's no silver bullet, but having a differentiated seal like Akamai, the reason why we are very effective in identifying sophisticated attacks is because to determine those attacks, you need all the data. And Akamai pretty much delivers 30% of the world's traffic, right, over our platform. All the who's who, FSI, commerce companies, media companies, everyone that gets attacked is being protected by a platform. So I see almost 95% of the IPs and malicious requests in a given day, right? So with that, over the past 20 years, we've come up with algorithms and data sets to determine and block this. And it's an ever-evolving landscape, right? So we are a great first line of defense, and we provide effective protection against sophisticated attacks. But that's not the only one, right? You still have the others. But a short answer is yes. That is absolutely one of the reasons why we are able to enable zero trust, is because we can determine the threat profile of that device and then allow or not allow access. That is one of the parameters.
Okay, there is one more question by one Mr. Padmanabh Deshmukh. Few mobile apps are available on internet from data centers. How existing access can be kept seamless with Akamai solutions if organizations go for a on-prem solution?
I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly, but if I understood it, you're saying organizations have they have their applications on-prem in
That's
the
right.
And how can people how can Akamai provide seamless access to this? Now
That's
the
right.
is so this model is application location agnostic. You can be in your on-prem data center, you can be in a cloud, you can be in SaaS, you can be in colo, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. So it supports all those environments, and even the user can be accessing it from a desktop, from a tablet, a laptop. The whole purpose of that model is to be agnostic, try to be agnostic to the application, agnostic to user. So you're location independent, and you just connect one to the other as long as the access profiles match. That's the only goal. So bottom line is, any device is possible to be accessed from. Any application hosting environment will do. That's the beauty of the internet, right? You're ubiquitous. The internet can be reached from anywhere and any data center to any user, as opposed to private lines.
Great. There's one more question by Mr. Sachit. So if we install the software in DC, how the software recognize the client?
Yeah, so frankly, that's the mechanism of the platform, right? Where, if you guys are on the IT side, you have this, you would be familiar when machine, especially when you're making a HTTP request, remember this is all layer 7, right? You have a particular address or an IP and you make a connection, TLS connection, and there's a mutually authenticated certificate exchange. So using those standards of exchange between two entities, Akamai maintains a secure channel between your piece of software and the data center and the platform. And this is all outbound. Remember, none of your inbound ports are open, right? They're completely shut. So that's a proprietary mechanism. And again, for organizations like FSI companies that want the details, it's all there in the security posture document on how the channel is secure, why there's no data stored, why there's no PII. So that's the bread and butter of the proxy platform. And just to put it in perspective, folks, I'm sure many of you all here have watched the IPL on mobile phones, right? This very same platform that I'm talking about for you to deliver your internal apps is the platform that delivered those IPL videos securely to every user. So the goal, the proprietary nature of the platform is then to ensure in this unsecure and unstable internet with a myriad of networks, to build this secure channel over TLS so that the user can connect to the application in your data center end-to-end over my platform.
So there is a follow-up question whether this works on dynamic IPs as well.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because remember, again, go back to the analogy. Guys, if you think of the analogy of your personal bank, that's the best, right? Do you worry about IPs in your personal bank? No. You just have ICICIbank.com or AxisBank.com. Similarly, it'll be intranet.company.com. These are, as far as the user is concerned, very human recognizable. You just have to worry about the application name and your credentials, and everything else is taken care of and hidden by. And at the back end, depending on the organization's infrastructure, you can support any form of connection of from the Akamai platform, the necessary bridging to talk to your application. Could be Legacy app with proprietary authentication like Radius and whatnot, or Kerberos or NTLM, or even OAuth and SAML, the more new age authentications, right? All of the bridging will be done by the platform. User doesn't have to worry about it. No worrying about IPs. It can be static, dynamic, doesn't matter.
All right. Thanks, Bruno. There is one question for Dr. Pavan Duggal from Mr. Nusrin Kumar, which says, will the cyber insurance cover if any incident happening from work from home environment? Dr. Duggal, this question is for you.
I think Pavan mentioned he had a hard stop. I don't know if he's there. I can't see him on the screen.
So either Pavan is on mute. Let me just see.
So I've got unmuted. So all I can say is that it looks logical that you should look for some cyber insurance players. I'm not so sure whether there are any specific offerings right now in the market, because for the insurance people to also try to give you an insurance cover for employees working from home, they'll have to do some basic calculations. But right now, with these figures coming in, with the economic losses not yet quantified, but running into billions, one is not very sure as to how these insurance companies could potentially be offering you these covers. So please look at some of the offerings that some of the top players are providing for you. In case if they are providing any such cover, I would encourage you to look through the fine print, because the chances are in the fine print, they will put in a lot of exclusions that you will not be entitled to this A, B, C, D, E. So I'm not yet aware of any specific offering which is giving you a blanket kind of insurance for all activities pertaining to work from home in coronavirus. Yes, there could be earlier work from home policies, but a lot of these companies would have gone ahead and restricted their usage or their issuance, primarily because the entire coronavirus ecosystem today has different calculations, and nobody has completely done as to what are the basis of these calculations. So if they're offering, please go ahead and take them. If they're not offering, then I think your local compliances should be also helping you ride through the day. Thanks.
Dr. Duggal, there is one more question from one Mr. Sujay, which says, any special obligations and possible policy statements to be changed for organizations to allow work from home as a new normal strategy?
Well, for these organizations who are now allowing work from home as the new normal, you would be required to make changes in your policies. For example, if your traditional policies have been defined, keeping in mind the specific premises of the company and under the presumption that the employee would be in the premises of the company, then those provisions under existing policies will have to be changed. Ideally, it's always a good idea that you come up with a supplemental work from home policy for the organization. And you should say that, look, this work from home policy should go ahead and have superseding effect and should really cover all aspects pertaining to the operations to be done from home, and should cover the rights, duties, and responsibilities of employees as also of the employer. And in the event there is going to be a conflict between the work from home policy and the existing other corporate policies, to the extent applicable in the context of the coronavirus age, the specific provisions pertaining to the work from home policy should stand superseding the other general provisions per se. But merely having these policies may not suffice. It will be very important that you must have the requisite written consent of the employee working from home to the effect that he has consented to these new terms or to the new work from home policy. Because even if you have a policy and you don't have a consent, tomorrow, in the event the matter goes to court, the employee or anyone else will say there is no binding consent of the employee to the said policy, and hence he could not have been forced to adhere to or abide by its terms per se. And how do you take that consent? Take that consent electronically. Ideally, in case if he's using digital signatures, use the digital signatures for electronic authentication. In case digital signatures are not being used, at least put the work from home policy on your intranet. So the moment he logs in, please click on an icon which should say, I have read the terms and conditions of the work from home policy. He should be able to scroll down the policy, Merely giving the link to the policy would not be sufficient, because normally the law says if you have given a link and you've given I accept, normally speaking, I accept has not been deemed to be proper legal consent. So if he scrolls down through the entire contents of the work from home policy and then clicks on I accept, and you at the back end as an organization are able to capture that particular I accept click along with date and timestamp, that will be deemed to be legal valid consent within the parameters of the IT Act. So get those consents in place, get it running. It's always a good idea to keep on doing more capacity building amongst your employees, sensitizing them on what they should not be doing, so that some kind of constant drilling could also potentially have an impact. And that's all you would be required to be doing at the current moment. Otherwise, all normal policies will continue as they are. But in case of a conflict, the work from home policy will supersede all other policies. Thanks.
Dr. Duggal, there is one more question, which is there a special license or registration required for contact centers with respect to work from home?
Sorry, is there a specific license required for call centers?
Contact centers, special licenses or registrations required for contact centers with respect to work from home?
Well, if you're a contact center, the fact still remains is you still become a network service provider and intermediary. So your compliances under law is definitely have to be done under the IT Act. In addition, well, if you are a contact center, please go through the specific definition of the OSP to find out whether your obligations or your current performances would come within the parameter of that particular definition. And if possible, then go ahead and apply. Even if you think that you are not particularly covered by this, I don't think it's going to cost a lot for the company. All it's going to be really requiring will be taking a small kind of insurance by putting in place your application for an OSP registration. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Duggal. Folks, any more questions? Okay, there is one question from Mr. Ramesh. Does OSP license requirement apply for government agencies?
Sorry, could you repeat that question? Does OSP license what?
Does OSP license requirement apply for government agencies as well?
Well, the OSP does not make a distinction. It's a question as even if you're a governmental agency, if you get covered within the definition of the other service provider services, then whether independent of whether you're government or not, it's always a good idea to apply, because the law does not make a distinction. Though if you are under the IT Act, then you could potentially take the benefit of Section 84 of the IT Act, which categorically says that if you have done any performance of any duties as a governmental entity, and you've done those things in discharge of your official duties, and the same have been done bona fidely, then there can be no legal exposure for you as a governmental entity. But barring that, the OSP definitions don't make any such distinctions. So please go through your specific parameters of your activities, map them vis-a-vis the definition pertaining to OSPs given, and see whether you can really would be wanting to do it. Traditionally, OSPs are only required for call centers, but in these new work from home ecosystems, with these new normals, I think it will be imperative for us to go ahead and have a relook at the existing definitions. Thanks.
Dr. Duggal, there is one more interesting question from Mr. Amar Tiwari, who says, is it enough to understand cybersecurity law from India law perspective through various books of yours, which are available on Amazon?
Well, thank you. Yes, there are various books of mine on Amazon on cybersecurity. If you read through them, you could have a broad idea. But the fact remains is that, yes, you will still have to be applying your mind on what is your specific requirement. At the end of the day, it's nothing but your compliances with the actual laws. Actually, what's happening is the Ministry of Electronics and IT has been giving a lot of these notifications which have an impact upon protection and preservation of cyber security. So please look at that, look at some of my books, and wait for this new dedicated law. The minister is now talking of a new dedicated law. I don't know when that comes in. Hopefully that should come in after the pandemic comes to a close. But now cybersecurity legalities will have to be an integral part of all the organization's day-to-day activities and business approaches. You can no longer say that, look, cybersecurity is the technical guy's job. I'm not required to do it. On top of it, the government has actually now stated in its rules that an ISO 27001 is a mandatory requirement for any organization to comply with the basic requirements of reasonable security practices and procedures when you are dealing, handling, or processing third-party content. And in case, if you as an organization are dealing with sensitive personal data, my 2 bits of advice to you would be, please also ensure that add the cherry on top of the apple, which is, or the cake, which is that add your respective compliances for dealing, handling, or processing sensitive personal data as have been specifically given under the Information Technology Rules 2011. I hope that suffices the answer to your question. Thanks, but really would like to appreciate that you have referred to my books. And yes, I've been writing these books. The idea is basically just to give back to the community as to what's happening. This is a constantly evolving space. Unfortunately, India is far behind. A lot of countries like China, like Vietnam, Singapore, Thailand, Macau, Egypt have become far more ahead in the cybersecurity law game because they've come up with dedicated national laws on cybersecurity. But very soon, I think we should see one in India as well. Thanks. Nagesh, is it possible for that I should sign off? I have a hard stop at 12:25. Actually, it's 28.
28, yeah. Sure, sir. Really thanks done for your time over here. Sir, any word of thanks?
Yeah, Pavan, thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for being a part of this and for helping me share my perspectives. I'm happy to be of assistance to you. We are available with Harsh, with Bruno. Let us know if you require anything. Happy to assist you. And thanks and wish you all the best. And
Thank you, sir.
Have a good day. Bruno, there is one question for you from one Mr. Bharadwaj, which says, any recommendations to customers working on BCP initiatives?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, everyone should be, if they aren't already considering a BCP initiative moving forward. I just want them to remember that whatever remote access solution you had in place right now was designed pre-corona time, right? So it was not designed keeping in mind that the entire workforce will be away from working from outside the office. So now that we are in this mode where we probably have the time to reassess and our priorities for 2020, definitely now consider a model for this new reality of employees being everywhere and predominantly outside the office. And as you're going through that assessment, reach out to the trio of iValue, Akamai, and Pavan Duggal and Associates, and we can certainly help you get on that journey so you have an optimal architecture for this new ecosystem that you're going to be dealing with. Yeah, so definitely.
Nagesh, are you there? Can we have one last question, looking at the time, and then perhaps call it a close?
Yes, sir, I'm here. I guess the round of questions which were coming on the chat are done with.
That's good to know. Okay.
Okay, so I think, Nagesh, we'll wait for your final comments and close. But before that, I just want to say, if folks, any of you have any more questions, what we will do is we will share the mail IDs of all the speakers and all the stakeholders. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we will immediately come back, especially the question on cyber insurance. I don't remember the name, but do write to us. We will give you some insight as to what is really happening in the overall scheme of things, and perhaps would be dwelling into the work from home enterprises as well. Thank you. Over to you, Nagesh.
All right, sir. It's 12:31. I think we are bang on time. We've maintained the presentations and the questions well within our given timeline. So, folks, I hope there are no further questions at this point of time. If they're there, then we'll be glad to answer. Otherwise, we'll definitely reach out to you. You have iValue's email credentials. Right, do reach out to us for any more queries that you have. Thanks, Bruno, and thanks, her, sir, for the presentation. I think we can call it for the day.
Hey, thank you all of you. Really appreciate, man. Thanks a ton. Thank you.
Thank you.